Nostradamus saw the great split of 2025, a world torn between light and shadow, prayer for peace. A quiet hum beneath the noise of daily life, a subtle vibration in the air that wasn't there a few years ago. It's a sense that the world is pulling itself, slowly but surely, in two opposing directions. It's not something you'd often read about in the headlines. Not exactly. It's more personal than that. You might feel it during a conversation with an old friend, where you suddenly realize you're speaking from entirely different worlds. You might sense it in the tension at a family gathering, a silent disagreement that hangs in the air, heavier than any spoken word. It's almost as if we're all standing on a vast pane of glass. For generations, it held us all. But now, a hairline crack has appeared. It started small, almost invisible, but with each passing day, it seems to spread, branching out, until the integrity of the whole thing feels questionable. An invisible current seems to be flowing through our lives, gently but relentlessly pulling us apart, separating neighbor from neighbor, family from family, thought from thought. If you've sensed this feeling that the very ground beneath our feet has become unsteady, then you are not alone. It is an echo in the room of our collective consciousness, a feeling that something fundamental is shifting. And it leads to a profound question. What if this feeling, this fracture we sense in the year 2025, is not new? What if it is an echo, carried across centuries, from the quill of a 16th century physician and seer who warned of a time he called the Great Split? The Split Manifested, a portrait of 2025. So, what does this Great Split actually look like here in 2025? It's not a single event, not a dramatic breaking point, but rather a slow, insidious unraveling woven into the fabric of our daily lives. Perhaps the most obvious sign is the deep polarization that now defines so much of our public discourse. It's not simply that we disagree on policies. That's always been part of democracy. It's that we can no longer agree on what island. It feels like we're living in parallel realities, each constructed by the information we consume and the communities we inhabit. We are living in the age of the great untethering, where common ground feels like a distant memory. Think about it. How many conversations have you had recently where you felt you were speaking the same language, using the same definitions, operating from the same basic set of agreed-upon facts? It's becoming increasingly rare. Consider how two people can watch the same news broadcast and come away not with different opinions, but with entirely different sets of facts. One sees a responsible report, the other sees a manipulative propaganda piece. One sees a threat, the other sees a hoax. This is the heart of the split, not just diverging viewpoints, but diverging realities. This phenomenon is amplified by the echo chambers we create for ourselves online. We gravitate toward sources that confirm our existing beliefs, and algorithms reinforce this tendency by feeding us more of what we already like. We become trapped in information silos, surrounded by voices that validate our worldview and shielded from anything that might challenge it. And this isn't limited to politics, is it? We see this fracturing of shared reality across a multitude of issues: climate change, healthcare, even basic scientific facts. It's as if we've lost the ability to have a reasoned debate because we can't even agree on the premises. Beyond the grand stage of politics and national discourse, this split is also playing out in more intimate settings: our communities, our families, and even our friendships. How many of you have experienced the strain of political disagreements with loved ones? How many friendships have been tested or even broken by the widening ideological divide? It's a painful truth. The very bonds that used to unite us, shared experiences, common values, a sense of belonging, are now being strained by the forces of division. Thanksgiving dinner becomes a minefield. Holiday gatherings are fraught with unspoken tensions. The simple act of sharing an opinion on social media can trigger a cascade of anger and resentment. Another manifestation of this split is the erosion of trust in our core institutions. From government to the media, from the financial system to even scientific research, there's a growing sense of skepticism, a feeling that the institutions we once relied on to guide us are no longer serving our best interests. This isn't just blind cynicism, it's a response to a series of broken promises, scandals, and perceived betrayals that have chipped away at our confidence in those in positions of power. We see corruption, we see bias, we see self-serving agendas masquerading as public service, and as a result, we become increasingly wary of anyone claiming to be an authority. Even science, which was once viewed as a beacon of objective truth, is now subject to intense scrutiny and doubt. The politicization of scientific findings, the influence of corporate funding, and the rise of misinformation have created a climate where even established facts are questioned and debated. On a global scale, this internal fracturing mirrors a growing instability in the world order. Alliances that once seemed unbreakable are now strained. Long-standing partnerships are being questioned. The rise of nationalism and protectionism has created a more fragmented and unpredictable geopolitical landscape. And underlying it all is a deep sense of economic unease. The gap between the rich and the poor continues to widen. The middle class feels increasingly squeezed. Many fear that the economic system is rigged in favor of the wealthy and powerful, leaving ordinary people struggling to make ends meet. This economic anxiety fuels the flames of division, creating fertile ground for resentment and anger. This, perhaps, is the world torn between light and shadow that the prophecies hinted at. Not a battle of good versus evil in a biblical sense, but a battle for the very nature of reality itself. A battle for what we choose to believe, what we choose to trust, and what kind of future we choose to build. It's a challenging portrait, no doubt. It's not meant to inspire despair, but rather a clear-eyed recognition of the landscape we inhabit. Because only by understanding the true nature of the split can we begin to bridge it. The man who saw through time, understanding Nostradamus. So, who was this man, this figure from the distant past, whose words seem to echo so hauntingly in our present moment? To truly grasp the weight of his visions, we must first look past the myths and see the man himself. His name was not Nostradamus. That was a Latinized version he adopted later in life. He was born Michel de Nostradamus in the south of France in 1503. And he was not, by trade, a mystic or a magician. He was a man of science and letters, an accomplished physician, an apothecary, a scholar. To understand him, we must first understand his world. It was a time of profound uncertainty, an era saturated with death and division. He lived through the height of the Renaissance, but also through the horrors of the plague. As a doctor, he stood on the front lines of this battle, traveling from town to town, treating the afflicted, surrounded by a suffering that is difficult for us to imagine. He knew intimately how fragile life was and how quickly societies could unravel under pressure. But there was another plague in his time, a plague of the soul. Nostradamus lived in a France that was being torn apart by the violent French wars of religion. It was a brutal, decades-long civil conflict between Catholics and Protestants, known as Huguenots. This was not a disagreement of polite theology. It was a savage fight to the death over whose version of God, whose version of truth, was the correct one. Cities were turned into battlefields. Neighbors betrayed neighbors. Families were fractured. He lived in a world fractured by religious dogma, much like ours is fractured by ideological certainties. He understood, from first-hand experience, what happens when neighbors stop speaking the same language of truth. He saw how absolute conviction, devoid of compassion, could turn ordinary people into monsters. It was from this crucible of plague, war, and societal collapse that his visions were born. In the midst of this turmoil, he began to write. His great work, Les Prophéties, The Prophecies, was not a straightforward book. It was composed of nearly 1,000 short, 4-line verses called quatrains, and they are famously and intentionally cryptic. He wrote in a complex mixture of languages, mostly his native Middle French, but sprinkled with Latin, Greek, and other tongues. He filled his verses with astrological references, symbolic imagery, and metaphors that were deliberately ambiguous. Scholars have debated for centuries why he chose this style. Perhaps it was to avoid being tried for heresy or witchcraft, a very real danger at the time. Or perhaps it was something deeper. Perhaps he understood that the future is not a fixed point, and that his words would need to be fluid enough to resonate across different eras. And that brings us to the most important point in understanding his work. It is crucial to understand that Nostradamus did not write a roadmap of the future. He painted a landscape of recurring human patterns, the rise and fall of empires, the arrogance of power, the destructive nature of fanaticism, and the profound consequences of societal division. He wasn't predicting the specific name of a future leader or the exact date of a battle. He was identifying the rhythms of history, the timeless human impulses that lead to greatness and to ruin. He saw that the same forces that tore his world apart, the loss of shared truth, the rise of extremist beliefs, the failure of trust, would inevitably rise again in different forms, in different centuries. He was a physician not just of the body, but of the body politic, and he saw the symptoms of a disease that afflicts all of humanity, a disease whose fever seems to be spiking in our own time. Reading the signs, the symbols of division. So, if Nostradamus was painting in patterns and symbols, what are the specific signs he used to depict this time of the Great Split? When we look at his quatrains through the lens of our world in 2025, some of his most enigmatic images begin to glow with a startling new relevance. They feel less like ancient riddles and more like mirrors reflecting our own time. Perhaps the most powerful and perplexing of these symbols is his vision of two suns in one sky. One passage speaks of two suns appearing in the sky, a vision that has puzzled scholars for centuries. For a long time, people tried to interpret this literally. Could it be an astronomical event, a comet, a supernova? But what if the seer was not speaking of the physical heavens? What if, as he so often did, he was using the sky as a metaphor for human consciousness, for the way we perceive reality itself? In 2025, does this not perfectly describe a world where we no longer share a common sky of information, but live under the glare of our own curated algorithmic suns? Think of our modern information landscape. Each of us orbits a different Sunday. One sun might be a constellation of news channels, websites, and social media influencers that presents one version of reality. Another sun, just as bright and just as convincing to its followers, is made up of a completely different set of sources, presenting a reality that is fundamentally incompatible with the first. Each sun insists it alone gives light and truth, and to those who live beneath it, the light of the other sun appears as a dangerous and deceptive darkness. This is the very essence of the fractured reality we discussed earlier. We have the same world, but two suns. The same set of events, but two completely different interpretations, two truths that cannot coexist. Nostradamus could not have imagined the glowing screens or the invisible codes that shape our beliefs, yet his haunting image seems to capture the consequence of it all with breathtaking accuracy. We have been split into separate solar systems of belief, each one pulling us further away from the other. Then there is his recurring imagery of chaos in the natural world, symbols that feel all too familiar to us today. He wrote of fire from the sky, and times when the earth shall crack. For generations, these phrases were read as purely apocalyptic visions of war and destruction, and they certainly can represent that. But what if they also hold a more layered meaning? Fire from the sky today is not just the stuff of bombs and missiles. It is the literal fire of unprecedented wildfires that consume entire landscapes, a direct consequence of a climate in distress. It is the fire of scorching heat waves that settle over our cities. The sky itself, through drought and extreme weather, delivers a kind of fiery judgment. And the image of the earth cracking? It's a powerful metaphor for the cracking of our societal foundations. When trust crumbles, when communities are torn apart by suspicion, the very ground on which our civilization is built begins to fracture. The cracks are the divisions we see everywhere between political parties, between urban and rural communities, between different generations. The stable earth of shared values and common purpose is splitting apart beneath our feet. These natural symbols are not separate from the human drama. In Nostradamus's vision, they are a reflection of it. A divided humanity creates a disordered world. An imbalance in our souls is mirrored by an imbalance in the sky and on the earth. Finally, and perhaps most painfully, Nostradamus pointed to a profound moral and spiritual sign: the age of betrayal and the collapse of trust. His verses are filled with warnings about a time when promises would be broken, when leaders would deceive their people, and when the trusted shall turn unfaithful. He understood that betrayal is not just a political act, it is a spiritual poison. Once it enters the bloodstream of a society, it attacks the very bonds that hold everything together. And is this not the rhythm of our age? We see it in the grand scale of geopolitics, as long-standing alliances fray and nations pursue their own interests with little regard for old commitments. We see it in our own society, where public faith in nearly every major institution has fallen to historic lows. We feel a deep sense of betrayal by systems that we were told were there to protect us, only to find they often serve the powerful and well-connected. Nostradamus warned that trust would be the first casualty of this new age, and he was right. When people no longer believe the words of their leaders, their journalists, their experts, then society begins to dissolve. Rumor replaces fact, fear replaces reason, and loyalty becomes a fragile, temporary thing. When he wrote of brother against brother, perhaps he was seeing not just a future war, but the quiet, painful fracturing of families and friendships over opposing beliefs. This is the most intimate form of betrayal, the one that hurts the most. It's the feeling of being misunderstood and misrepresented by the very people you thought knew you best. Nostradamus saw this collapse of trust not as a random event, but as the inevitable result of a world living under two suns. When reality itself is contested, how can you trust anyone who doesn't share your version of it? Betrayal becomes the natural, tragic outcome of the Great Split. It is the final stage of decay before the fire, the rot in the foundation just before the structure gives way. And so, we stand at a threshold. The prophecies of Nostradamus, viewed through this lens, are not meant to paralyze us with fear. They are not a final verdict on our destiny. They are meant to awaken us to the profound power of our own choices, both individually and collectively. They serve as a mirror, reflecting the stark reality of our moment and asking us what we intend to do about it. Because the Great Split is not merely something happening to us, like a storm that rolls in from a distant sea. It is something happening through us, forged in the small moments of our daily lives by every choice we make, the choice to either deepen the divide or to begin building a bridge. It's in the words we choose, the patience we offer, and the understanding we extend or withhold. Before we continue to our second part, where we will explore how to find peace amidst this chaos, I want to leave you with a question for reflection. In your own life, in your own community, how have you seen this split manifest? It is not an abstract idea. It lives in our daily experiences. It's in the friendships that have grown distant, the family conversations that are now avoided, the quiet tensions felt in places that once felt like home. Sharing these stories, not for debate but for understanding, is a small act of weaving our world back together. It is a way of acknowledging our shared reality, even if that reality is one of division. Please take a moment to share your reflections in the comments below. Your voice is a vital part of this conversation, and if you find value in this exploration, consider subscribing to stay with us on this journey. The prayer for peace, forging an anchor in the storm. In the first part of our journey, we walked through the shadowed landscape painted by Nostradamus, a world fractured, a society divided. It is natural to feel a sense of unease, perhaps even helplessness, in the face of such a vision. When we look at the sheer scale of the divisions around us, it's easy to feel small, to feel as though our own peace is entirely at the mercy of the chaos outside. And if you feel that weight, that is perfectly understandable. It is the response of a caring heart to a world in pain. But the purpose of these ancient warnings, these echoes from the past, was never to leave us stranded in fear. It was to ask a profound question, a question that becomes more urgent with each passing day. When the world outside feels like a storm, where do we find our anchor? This brings us to the heart of our exploration today, the prayer for peace. Now, let's be very clear about what we mean by prayer in this context. This isn't about asking an outside force to fix the world. It is something far more immediate, far more personal, and far more within our control. This is not a prayer of passive wishing. It is a prayer of active forging, the forging of an unshakable peace within yourself that no external chaos can shatter. It is the conscious, deliberate act of building a sanctuary inside your own soul, a place of stillness and strength that can serve as your foundation, no matter how fiercely the winds may blow. Redefining peace in a divided world. To begin this work of forging an anchor, we must first be very honest about the material we are using. We must ask ourselves a simple yet profound question. What is this peace that we are truly seeking? For most of our lives, and through no fault of our own, we have been conditioned to think of peace as an absence. It's the absence of conflict. It's the absence of noise. It's the absence of problems. We think of peace as the sigh of relief when a difficult project is finally done, or the quiet in the house after a heated argument has finally ended. It is, in its essence, a conditional state. Its very existence depends entirely on what is happening, or, more accurately, what is not happening outside of us. And in a world like ours, in the complex reality of 2025, defining peace in this way is a recipe for constant, low-grade disappointment. It is a source of profound exhaustion. If our inner peace is contingent upon the world agreeing, upon the news becoming less alarming, upon people becoming more reasonable, then we have handed the keys to our own well-being over to forces we simply cannot control. We sentence ourselves to a life of waiting, waiting for the election cycle to be over, waiting for the economy to stabilize, waiting for that difficult family member to change their ways, waiting for the anger in the world to finally subside. It's a fragile peace, a borrowed peace, one that can be shattered in an instant by a single news alert on our phone, a single angry comment online, a single thoughtless remark from someone we love. It is, ultimately, a peace that leaves us powerless. But what if this entire definition is flawed? What if we have been searching for the wrong thing entirely? What if true peace is not an absence of something, but the powerful, deliberate presence of something? For too long, we have mistaken peace for the silence that follows a storm. But true, enduring peace is the deep, quiet confidence of the lighthouse that stands firm while the waves crash against it. The lighthouse doesn't try to stop the storm. It doesn't command the waves to be still. It simply tends to its own light, holds its ground, and shines. It is not an external condition. It is an internal constitution. This is the peace we are talking about today. It is a peace that is active, not passive. It is a peace that is resilient, not fragile. It is a peace that does not depend on the world changing, because it depends entirely on us changing our relationship to the world. It is the cultivation of a steady center, a place of profound inner stillness that exists independently of the chaos surrounding it. It is the ability to hear the noise and the outrage of the world, but not be deafened by it. It is the ability to see the division and the sorrow, but not be consumed by it. The ancient Stoic philosophers, thinkers who lived in times just as turbulent as our own, built their entire way of life around this powerful understanding. They taught that the path to tranquility begins with a single, crucial distinction, separating what is within your control from what is not. The great sweep of history, the events in the news, the opinions of others, the anger of a stranger, these things are largely outside of our control. To pin our happiness and our peace on them is to build our house on the shifting sands of a shoreline, vulnerable to every incoming tide. But our own thoughts, our own responses, our own integrity, our chosen character, our inner state, these are within our control. This is the bedrock upon which we can build a fortress. True peace, they argued, comes from focusing our finite energy, not on trying to command the uncontrollable seas, but on becoming an unshakable captain of our own inner ship. Now, it is essential to understand that this is not a message of apathy. It is not a call to give up on the world or to stop caring. In fact, it is the exact opposite. It is only from a place of inner stability, from that lighthouse-like center, that we can act in the world with true wisdom and compassion, rather than reacting with reflexive fear and anger. A frantic, anxious person cannot bring calm to a frantic, anxious situation. They only add more frantic energy to the fire. But a person who has cultivated their own peace can enter a room and, by their very presence, offer an alternative to the chaos. The world may be at war with itself, but your inner world does not have to be. The prayer for peace is the act of signing a treaty with yourself. It is a declaration of inner sovereignty. It is a quiet, daily commitment to tend to the garden of your own soul, to gently pull the weeds of anxiety and fear, and to intentionally plant seeds of clarity, compassion, and courage, regardless of what the external weather report says. This is the peace that cannot be taken from you, and in these times, it is the only peace that is truly worth finding. The Threefold Path, a practical prayer for inner stillness. So, how do we begin this practical work of forging peace? How do we translate this beautiful idea into a lived reality? Our prayer for peace is not a single incantation, but a threefold path. It is a daily practice composed of 3 verses, 3 areas of inner cultivation. Each verse is designed to directly counteract one of the powerful forces of the great split that we identified earlier. It is a practical map for navigating our inner world so that we can better navigate the outer one. Let us begin with the first verse. The first verse, a prayer for clarity. This first verse is our response to the challenge of living under 2 suns. It is our tool for finding our way through the blinding glare of conflicting realities and the constant storm of information. The first part of our prayer is for clarity. It is a quiet request, offered to the deepest part of ourselves. May I have the wisdom to see beyond the blinding light of the 2 suns. May I find the stillness to listen to the whisper of truth within my own heart, beneath the roar of conflicting certainties. In our age, the greatest battle is for our attention. Every screen, every notification, every headline is designed to capture it, and more often than not, to provoke an immediate emotional reaction. We are constantly nudged toward anger, fear, or outrage because those emotions keep us engaged, keep us scrolling, keep us clicking. Clarity, then, is not about finding the right information source. It is about reclaiming the quiet space within ourselves so we can discern what is truly happening. So how do we practice this prayer for clarity? First, we practice intentional digital silence. This doesn't mean you have to abandon technology. It simply means carving out small, sacred pockets of time each day to be free from its influence. It could be the first 15 minutes after you wake up, before you reach for your phone. It could be a walk around the block without any earbuds. It is in these moments of silence that our minds can reset. The constant hum of outside opinions fades, and we can begin to hear our own thoughts more clearly. This silence is the soil in which clarity grows. Second, we practice a new kind of questioning. When we encounter a piece of information, especially one that is emotionally charged, our first impulse is to ask, "Is this true?" But in a world of deepfakes and sophisticated propaganda, that question can be a trap. A more powerful practice is to pause and ask a different question. How does this information make me feel? Does it make me feel angry, afraid, self-righteous? Does it make me feel judgmental toward a group of people? Recognizing the emotional hook is the first step to freeing ourselves from it. When we can see that our emotions are being manipulated, we can consciously choose not to be pulled into the current. And finally, we learn to recognize the difference between a reaction and a response. A reaction is instant, emotional, and often unconscious. It's that immediate surge of anger, that quick, defensive comment. A response, on the other hand, is born in the pause. It is conscious, considered, and aligned with our deeper values. The practice of clarity is the practice of widening that pause. When you feel that jolt of reaction, you learn to take a breath. You give yourself a moment. In that moment, you reclaim your freedom. You are no longer a puppet of the algorithm or the outrage machine. You are a conscious being, choosing how to engage with the world from a place of inner stillness. The second verse, a prayer for compassion. This second verse is our antidote to the poison of betrayal and the collapse of trust. If the world is fracturing along lines of us versus them, our work is to build bridges of understanding, starting within our own hearts. The second part of our prayer is for compassion. This is a courageous plea because it asks something difficult of us. May I have the strength to look upon those with whom I disagree and see not an enemy, but a fellow human being acting from their own pain and fear. May I become a source of understanding in a world drowning in accusation. Compassion is perhaps the most misunderstood of all virtues. It is not agreement. It is not condoning harmful behavior. It is not weakness. Compassion is the radical act of acknowledging the shared humanity in someone, even when you fundamentally disagree with their actions or beliefs. It is the wisdom to understand that behind most anger, there is fear. Behind most hatred, there is a deep, unhealed wound. The practice of compassion is our most powerful tool against the dehumanization that fuels the Great Split. So, how do we cultivate it? First, we practice deep listening. This is a way of listening to another person not with the intent to reply, not to debate or to correct, but simply to understand. It means giving your full presence to someone. It means listening to the words they are saying, but also listening for the feelings beneath the words. When a family member is expressing a political view that you find abhorrent, can you listen past the rhetoric and hear the fear they might have for their family's future? Can you hear the desire for safety or respect that might be driving their opinion? Deep listening doesn't mean you will end up agreeing, but it makes a shared connection possible. It replaces a battlefield with a common ground, however small. Second, we practice looking for the fear behind the anger. When you see vitriol online or witness hostility in person, make it a practice to ask yourself, what might this person be afraid of? Are they afraid of losing their way of life? Are they afraid of being forgotten? Are they afraid of a changing world they no longer understand? This question shifts you from a place of judgment to a place of curiosity. It doesn't excuse their behavior, but it rehumanizes them in your eyes. And it often helps you to see your own fears reflected in theirs. Finally, we practice forgiveness. This is often the hardest work, but the deepest division is not between us and others, but within ourselves. We hold on to resentments and judgments, and they become a heavy burden. The practice of forgiveness begins with forgiving ourselves for the times we've been judgmental, for the times we've reacted with anger, for the times we've failed to live up to our own values. When we can offer that grace to ourselves, it becomes infinitely easier to offer it to others. Forgiveness is the act of letting go of the hope for a better past. It is the choice to release the poison of resentment so that we can be free to act with a clearer heart in the present. The third verse, a prayer for courage. Once we have cultivated clarity and compassion, we need a way to bring them into the world. This is where the final verse comes in. This verse is our answer to the overwhelming feeling of helplessness in the face of cracking foundations and consuming fires. The final part of our prayer is for courage, but we must redefine courage for our time. This is not the loud courage of the battlefield or the dramatic courage of a hero in a story. This is a quieter, more steadfast kind of courage. It is the courage to be a gentle presence in a harsh world. It is the courage to live with integrity when it feels like everything is falling apart. This is a quiet commitment we make to ourselves. May I have the courage not to change the world, but to faithfully tend to my small corner of it. May my presence be a testament that even in a fractured time, integrity, kindness, and peace are possible. This is the courage of the everyday. It is the courage to choose your response, to act from your values, even and especially when it's difficult. So how do we practice this quiet courage? First, and most importantly, we focus on our sphere of influence, which we will explore in greater detail later. We consciously release the burden of trying to solve all the world's problems and instead turn our attention to the places where we have real agency, our homes, our workplaces, our communities. The courage is found in choosing to make these small domains pockets of peace. It's the courage to have that difficult but necessary conversation with your child. It's the courage to apologize when you're wrong. It's the courage to support a neighbor, even if you don't agree with their politics. Second, we practice small acts of anonymous kindness. The world shouts for grand gestures, but true change is often built on a foundation of small, unseen acts. Pay for the coffee of the person behind you in line. Leave a generous tip. Send a note of encouragement to someone who might be struggling. These acts are a quiet rebellion against the cynicism and self-interest of our time. They are small deposits into a collective bank account of grace. They remind us, and those we touch, that another way of being is possible. And finally, we practice the courage to be vulnerable. In a world that prizes certainty and rewards the loudest voice, there is immense courage in saying, "I don't know." There is courage in admitting you might have been wrong. There is courage in choosing connection over being right in an argument. When a conversation becomes heated, the courageous act is often not to win the point, but to be the person who says, "I hear how important this is to you. Maybe we can talk about it another time." This is not weakness, it is the ultimate strength. It is the strength to place the health of a relationship above the satisfaction of your own ego. This threefold path, clarity, compassion, and courage, is not a quick fix. It is a lifelong practice. It is the work of forging an anchor, day by day, choice by choice. It is how we answer the challenge of our time, not by trying to stop the great storm, but by becoming the calm within it. From prophecy to action, the lessons within. In our last chapter, we forged an anchor of peace within ourselves, a quiet space of clarity, compassion, and courage. We've explored the profound work of tending to our inner world. But an anchor is not meant to keep a ship in harbor forever. It is meant to provide stability so the ship can safely navigate the open sea. And so, we arrive at the final part of our journey together, where we carry this inner peace out into the world. The question before us now is not, what must we do to fix the world? That question is overwhelming. It can lead to burnout and despair. A more powerful, more manageable question is, how must we be in the world to help heal it? This is the bridge from prophecy to action. And this requires us to redefine what we think of as action. Our culture often equates action with noise, with protest, with grand, visible gestures. And those things can have their place. But there is another kind of action, a quieter and perhaps more potent form. It is the action of presence. This is the beginning of a quiet revolution. It is a revolution not of banners and slogans, but of presence. It is the radical act of bringing a calm, centered, and compassionate spirit into every room you enter, every conversation you have, every life you touch. It is based on a simple but profound truth. The energy you bring into a space is your most significant contribution to it. This is not passive. It is a conscious, active choice to be a force for stability in an unstable world, to be a source of grace in an age of anxiety. The law of the lighthouse, mastering your sphere of influence. So, how do we begin this quiet revolution of presence in a way that feels real and sustainable? It all starts with a single, liberating principle, a shift in perspective that can change everything. I call it the law of the lighthouse. I want you to hold an image in your mind. Picture a lighthouse. It stands on a rugged point of land, at the very edge of a vast, chaotic, and unpredictable ocean. It sees the storms gathering on the distant horizon. It feels the wind howl. It endures the fury of the waves crashing against its foundation. But the lighthouse does not try to calm the entire ocean. It doesn't rage back at the storm. It doesn't chase after ships that are struggling miles away, far beyond its reach. It understands its purpose with perfect, unwavering clarity. It simply stands its ground, tends to its own internal light, and shines, consistently and faithfully, right where it island. And by doing nothing more than this, it provides guidance, hope, and safety for all who are within its range. This is the law of the lighthouse, and it is the key to meaningful, sustainable action in a chaotic world. It teaches us to wisely distinguish between the two primary arenas of our lives, our sphere of concern and our sphere of influence. Understanding the difference between these two is perhaps the single most important practice for finding peace and purpose in our time. First, let's look at your sphere of concern. For most of us, this sphere is vast and ever-expanding. It contains everything you care about, but have little to no direct personal control over. It includes international politics, the national economy, the endless 24/7 news cycle with its alerts and breaking stories, the great cultural debates that rage on social media, in the wars and humanitarian crises happening on the other side of the world. It is the entire sprawling ocean. In our modern, hyper-connected world, we are encouraged, even pressured, to live almost exclusively in this sphere. Our technology is designed to pull us into it, to make us feel that it is our duty to be constantly informed, constantly engaged, constantly worried about every problem, everywhere, all at once. And what is the result of living primarily in this sphere? You know the feeling. It is a slow, draining sense of helplessness. It is a low-grade, persistent anxiety. It is frustration that verges on despair. We become spectators to a world on fire, feeling the heat, smelling the smoke, but standing too far away to actually throw a bucket of water. To invest all of our precious emotional energy in our sphere of concern is the fastest path to compassion, fatigue, and burnout. It paralyzes us. But then there is your sphere of influence. This is your lighthouse. This sphere is much smaller, but it is where your power is absolute, real, tangible, and immediate. Your sphere of influence is the circle of your actual, lived life. It's the people you interact with every single day. It's the atmosphere in your home. It's the culture in your workplace. It's the relationship with your next-door neighbor. It is the specific tone of voice you use when you speak to your spouse or partner in the morning. It is the quality of undivided attention you give to your children or grandchildren when they excitedly tell you a story. It's the patience you show to a new colleague who is struggling to learn their job. It's the simple, human act of looking the grocery store cashier in the eye, seeing them as a person, and offering a genuine thank you. The great mistake of our time, the one that causes so much of our personal and collective pain, is that we have these two spheres backward. We invest nearly all of our emotional energy, our anger, our fear, our passion, into the vast sphere of concern, where we have almost no power. And then we bring the leftover scraps of our energy, often our frustration, our distraction, and our exhaustion, into our precious sphere of influence, where our power is greatest. We get angry about a politician we will never meet, and then we are short-tempered with our family. We feel anxious about a global crisis we cannot solve, and then we are distracted and unavailable to a friend who has reached out for help. The practice of the lighthouse is to consciously and deliberately reverse this flow. It is the choice to pull your precious energy back from the raging ocean of what you cannot change and to invest it fully, richly, and intentionally in the small circle of what you can. So, your task is not to end the great split on a global scale. That is the ocean. Your task is to refuse to let it enter your home. That is your lighthouse. Your task is to be the calm voice in a heated family discussion. Your task is to be the person who listens more than they speak. Your task is to model the kind of respectful disagreement you wish you could see on the national stage, right there at your own dinner table. Please do not mistake this for a small thing. It is everything, because your sphere of influence is the only place where real, authentic change can ever begin. A family that learns to navigate differences with love becomes a quiet model for a community. A workplace that fosters genuine respect and collaboration becomes a subtle model for an industry. These pockets of sanity, these islands of grace, are the seeds from which a better world can actually grow. They are the lights that other struggling ships, the other people in your life, will see in the storm. So, when you feel that pull of anxiety from the wider world, when the noise of the news feels overwhelming, I invite you to use it as a trigger. Let it be a gentle reminder to return to your lighthouse. Ask yourself a simple question. What is the most loving and peaceful action I can take, right here, right now, within my own sphere? The answer might be to make a cup of tea for a loved one. It might be to turn off the television and read a book to a child. It might be to simply step outside, place your feet on the ground, and take 3 deep breaths to reset your own nervous system. In doing this, you are not abdicating your responsibility to the world. You are finally fulfilling it in the most potent and realistic way possible. You are not just tending your light, you are being the lighthouse. The practice of presence, digital sobriety in an age of outrage. Now, we cannot talk about mastering our sphere of influence without directly addressing the most powerful force that constantly tries to pull us out of it. We need to talk about our digital world. If the Great Split has an engine, a mechanism that accelerates our division day by day, it is found in the glowing screens we hold in our hands. The social media feeds, the news sites, the video platforms, these are not neutral spaces. It is essential that we understand this. The algorithms that power our digital world are not designed for our well-being. They are designed for one primary purpose: to keep our attention for as long as possible. And the programmers have learned a very simple and very dangerous truth about human nature. Nothing captures our attention quite like fear and outrage. Strong emotions keep us engaged. A calm, nuanced article doesn't get shared as widely as a headline that makes our blood boil. A story of quiet cooperation doesn't generate as many comments as a story of bitter conflict. And so, the algorithms learn. They learn to show us more of what provokes us, more of what angers us, more of what confirms our worst fears about the other side. They are the engines of the great split, profiting from our division. To be unaware of this dynamic is to be a puppet in their play. We are nudged and prodded into a constant state of low-grade agitation, and we mistake this agitation for being informed. To protect our inner peace and to be a true lighthouse in our own lives, we must therefore develop a new kind of practice. I call it digital sobriety. Now, sobriety does not mean total abstinence. This is not about abandoning technology and moving to a cabin in the woods, though that might sound appealing some days. Digital sobriety is about using these powerful tools with conscious intention, the way one might mindfully enjoy a single glass of fine wine rather than mindlessly consuming the whole bottle. It is the conscious choice to be the master of your attention rather than a servant to the algorithm. So, what does this practice look like in real life? It can be broken down into 3 simple, actionable strategies. First is the practice of conscious consumption. This means bringing a moment of mindfulness to the act of picking up your phone or opening your computer. Before you dive in, take one single, conscious breath and ask yourself a simple question. Why am I here right now? What am I looking for? Are you looking for a specific piece of information? Are you looking to connect with a specific person? Or are you simply looking for a distraction because you feel bored, lonely, or anxious? There's no judgment in the answer. The goal is simply to bring awareness to the act. So often, we reach for our devices on autopilot as an unconscious reflex. This small pause breaks the spell. It puts you back in the driver's seat. It's the difference between intentionally going to the refrigerator to get an apple and standing in front of it, unconsciously eating whatever you see. Second is the practice of curating for peace. Your digital feed is like the garden of your mind. If you allow anyone and everyone to throw seeds into it, you will soon have a garden full of weeds. Curating for peace is the act of becoming a mindful gardener. This is very practical. Once a week, take a few minutes to scroll through the accounts, pages, and news sources you follow. For each one, ask yourself, how does this make me feel? Does this source consistently make me feel angry, anxious, or judgmental? If the answer is yes, you have a choice. You can unfollow. You can mute. You are under no moral obligation to pour digital poison into your own mind every day. At the same time, actively seek out and follow sources that nurture your well-being. This could be pages dedicated to nature, to art, to inspiring stories, to calming philosophies, to humor. Intentionally plant flowers in your garden. Over time, this conscious curation will fundamentally change the character of your digital life, from a source of constant agitation to a potential source of nourishment and peace. You are shaping your algorithm rather than letting it shape you. And third is the practice of the digital sunset. Our minds, just like our bodies, need time to rest and recover from the stimulation of the day. For generations, the setting of the sun was a natural signal for human beings to begin winding down. Today, our screens blaze brightly long into the night, disrupting our natural rhythms and keeping our brains in a state of high alert. The digital sunset is a simple, powerful commitment to restore that natural rhythm. Choose a time each evening, perhaps 8 p.m., perhaps 9 p.m., to be your cutoff point. At that time, you intentionally put away all your screens for the night. The phone is plugged in across the room, not on your nightstand. The television is turned off, the laptop is closed. This creates a buffer of quiet, screen-free time before you go to sleep. It allows your nervous system to calm down. It allows your mind to transition from the endless stream of external information to a state of inner quiet. This practice can have a profound impact not only on the quality of your sleep, but on your overall sense of peace and resilience the following day. These three practices, conscious consumption, curating for peace, and the digital sunset, are the pillars of digital sobriety. They are not about restriction, they are about liberation. They are how we reclaim our most precious resource, our attention, and ensure that we are investing it in our own peace, rather than offering it up as fuel for the engines of division. The ultimate lesson, the choice of human nature. We have journeyed far together. We have looked at the echoes of an ancient prophecy. We have explored the work of forging an anchor of inner peace, and we have discussed the practical ways to be a lighthouse in our own small corner of the world. And now we arrive at the very heart of the matter. We arrive at the ultimate lesson that this challenging time is here to teach us, a lesson so fundamental that it underlies everything else we have discussed. When we strip away all the complexities, the politics, the technology, the headlines, the history, what are we left with? When we quiet all the external noise and look deep within ourselves, what is the essential truth of this moment? We are left with a single, timeless choice. The great split, in its truest and deepest form, is not happening between nations or political parties. It is not fundamentally between us and them, between left and right, between one belief system and another. Those are merely the symptoms, the outward expressions of a much deeper divide. The ultimate fault line, the original fracture from which all these other cracks emerge, runs silently down the center of every single human heart. It is the ancient internal struggle between two fundamental ways of being in the world, two potentials that exist within each of us. We can call them the way of reaction and the way of response. Let us look closely and gently at these two paths, because in understanding them, we understand the entire drama of our time. First, there is reaction. Reaction is our oldest, most primal programming. It is the language of our ancient reptilian brain, the part that is solely concerned with survival. It is instant. It is automatic. It is rooted in the fight-or-flight instincts that have kept our species alive for millennia. Reaction is fueled, almost entirely, by fear. It is the path of the quick judgment, the defensive crouch, the tribal instinct that sees anyone who is different as a potential threat. Reaction thinks in black and white, safe or unsafe, friend or foe. It is the world of us against them. It is the path of the shadow. And our modern technology, as we've discussed, has become a powerful supercharger for this reactive nature. It feeds it a constant 24-hour diet of perceived threats, amplifying our anxieties and rewarding our quickest, most emotional, and least thoughtful impulses with likes, shares, and comments. The world of reaction is a world of constant, low-grade nervous system activation. It is exhausting, and it is endlessly divisive. But we are more than just our primal programming. We are more than just a bundle of survival instincts. Within us lies another capacity, a quieter, more evolved, and infinitely more powerful potential. This is the path of response. Response is not automatic. In fact, its very nature is the opposite of automatic. It is conscious. It is intentional. Response is born in the sacred space that we can learn to create between what happens to us and what we choose to do about it. It requires a pause. It requires a breath. It requires us to bypass the instant flare-up of the primal brain and engage a higher part of ourselves, the part that is capable of empathy, of reason, of foresight, of seeing a bigger picture. Response is rooted not in fear, but in our chosen values. It is rooted in the clarity, the compassion, and the quiet courage that we have been exploring together. It is the path of the light. The great battle of our time, the true spiritual work of being alive in 2025, is fought in the microscopic, almost imperceptible space between stimulus and response. In that tiny, silent pause lies our freedom, our humanity, and our power to choose light over shadow. Let's make this real. Someone says something online or in person that angers you. That's the stimulus. The reaction is to lash out, to type the biting comment, to prove them wrong, to escalate the conflict. The response is to notice the anger rising within you like a hot flush, to take a single conscious breath, and in that space, to ask, I wonder what pain or fear is causing them to speak this way. You read a headline that frightens you. That's the stimulus. The reaction is to immediately share it, spreading the fear and anxiety to your network. The response is to pause, to practice the digital sobriety we spoke of, and to ask, is amplifying this anxiety the wisest and most helpful thing I can do right now? Or can I simply hold this information, process it, and refuse to be a conduit for more fear? Every day, in 1,000 small, uncelebrated moments, we are presented with this choice. Do we follow the well-worn downhill path of automatic reaction, adding one more small drop of fear and division to the ocean of the world's pain? Or do we undertake the more difficult, more conscious, uphill work of crafting a thoughtful response, adding one more small drop of peace and understanding? So, what is the nature of humanity in this modern world? Perhaps it is this. We are beings designed for connection, placed in an environment engineered for division, and our ultimate test, our great purpose, is to consciously and courageously choose connection, again and again, against all odds, to choose the response over the reaction. The prophecies of Nostradamus, when seen through this deeply personal lens, are not a prediction of a fixed doom. They are a profound spiritual challenge. He saw, perhaps, a time when the external forces of reaction, the fear, the propaganda, the tribalism, would become dangerously powerful, threatening to overwhelm our better natures. And he left the question hanging in the air for us, a question that has traveled across 5 centuries to land in our hearts today. In the face of such a test, what will humanity choose to become? Will we allow our environment to reduce us to our most primitive, reactive instincts? Or will we rise to the occasion and consciously evolve into the more compassionate, wise, and courageous beings we have always had the potential to be? That choice is not made by presidents or kings. It is not made in the halls of power or on the screens of our televisions. It is made in the quiet, holy sanctuary of the human heart. It is made by you, and it is made by me. And it is made not just once, but in every single moment of our lives that we choose to be awake. And so, our journey through these thoughts now comes to a close. It has been a long path, from the shadows of a 16th century prophecy to the quiet light within our own hearts. We began by feeling an echo, a sense of a world fracturing. We saw how this feeling is reflected in the divisions of our time. We then sought to understand the source of this echo, looking into the life of Nostradamus, not as a magician, but as a witness to his own divided world. From there, we turned inward. We chose not to dwell in fear, but to forge an anchor of peace through the threefold path of clarity, compassion, and courage. And finally, we explored how to carry that peace into our lives, not as grand heroes, but as steady lighthouses, shining right where we are. The echo of Nostradamus, in the end, is not a prophecy of doom. It is an invitation to awaken, to tend to our inner light, so that we may shine more brightly in a world that desperately needs it. The great split is here, the echo still calls, but you are not powerless. You are the answer. Your peace, your presence, your choice, that is the prayer for peace made manifest. If you are still listening to my voice, if you have remained with me on this entire journey, I want to ask for a small sign. Please, help me by commenting with the number 1 below. It is a simple way for me to know that there are fellow travelers who have walked this path with me to the very end. Your presence, even from afar, is the greatest encouragement for me to continue creating this shared journey with you. Thank you for your time and for your deep attention. It is a precious gift. Be well and be the light.